You might have seen that when people talk about the Kennedy family, they usually talk about speeches, elections, and moments frozen in black and white photographs. But families don't really live in history books. They live in houses. Long before the world ever heard the name John F. Kennedy spoken from a podium, the Kennedy story was already taking shape along the quiet shores of Cape Cod. Back in the late 1920s, Joseph P. Kennedy Sr. was building something bigger than just a fortune. He was building a future, carefully, deliberately, and with very high expectations. In 1928, he bought a modest summer home in a small seaside town called Hyannis Port, Massachusetts. At the time, no one could have known that this place would one day be called the Kennedy Compound. Over the years, that single house grew into several homes sitting side by side, all facing the Atlantic Ocean. The wind was always strong there. The water was always cold. And the children, there were many of them, grew up sailing, swimming, competing, and learning that losing was never really an option. To outsiders, it looked idyllic. Sailboats cutting across the water, laughter on the lawn, big family dinners that went late into the night. But inside those walls, there was pressure. Joseph Kennedy believed his children were destined for greatness, and he made sure they felt it every single day. Hyannis Port became more than a summer escape. It became the heart of the family. Decisions were discussed there. Arguments happened there. Victories were celebrated there. And when loss came, as it so often did for the Kennedys, it was there that the family gathered in silence. When John Kennedy entered politics, the compound changed again. Campaign plans were whispered on porches. Advisors came and went. Reporters waited outside the gates. During the 1960 presidential race, people started calling Hyannis Port the Summer White House. The same rooms that once held childhood games were now shaping the future of the country. But Cape Cod wasn't the only place where the Kennedys left their mark. When winter came, the family often traveled south to Palm Beach, Florida, to a large estate called La Querida. It was warm there, quiet, and carefully hidden from public view. John Kennedy spent time there recovering from serious injuries after World War II, lying in bed while the future president wondered whether his body would ever truly recover. Those walls saw vulnerability long before the world saw confidence. Then there was Newport, Rhode Island, and a grand old mansion called Hammersmith Farm. That house didn't belong to the Kennedys at first. It belonged to Jacqueline Bouvier's family. She grew up there, riding horses on the grounds, surrounded by elegance and expectation of a different kind. It was at Hammersmith Farm that Jackie and John Kennedy celebrated their wedding in 1953. For one brief moment, it felt like a fairy tale, the joining of two powerful American families, surrounded by beauty, youth, and promise. Not far from Washington, D.C., another home quietly played its role in history. Hickory Hill, in Virginia, became the home of Robert Kennedy and his growing family. It was always loud there. Children running through halls, guests staying late into the night, conversations about justice, war, civil rights, and responsibility happening over crowded dinner tables. If the White House was where decisions were announced, Hickory Hill was where many of them were truly debated. And then there was Wexford. Unlike the other estates, Wexford was not inherited or purchased out of tradition. It was built by John and Jacqueline Kennedy themselves. A quiet ranch in Virginia, inspired by Irish countryside, meant to be a place where they could finally breathe. They went there to escape the noise, to walk, to think, to be a family, not a symbol. It would become the last place they vacationed together before Dallas. After the assassinations, the estates did not disappear. The houses remained standing. The lawns were still cut. The ocean still came and went. But the family inside was forever changed. Hyannis Port became quieter. Gatherings were smaller. Conversations heavier. The same rooms that once rang with ambition now carried memory. That's the thing about houses like these. They don't forget. They remember the footsteps of children who never grew old. They remember laughter that ended too soon. They remember a family that seemed to have everything, and yet paid a price few others ever have. The Kennedy estates were never just homes. They were witnesses. And if you listen closely, history is still speaking through them.